Get out of my house, now!
Marcus Whitfield's voice cracked like thunder through the penthouse. His hands trembled. His chest heaved. The woman in the cleaning uniform stood motionless, still holding his paralyzed son's hand mid-dance. For 3 years, no one had touched Ethan. No one had reached him. Doctors gave up. Hope died. And now this stranger, this maid, was spinning his boy like nothing was broken. But what Marcus saw next stopped his heart cold. Ethan's eyes were open, tracking, alive. His son was watching her. Before we continue this incredible story, please subscribe to our channel and stay until the very end. Drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. We want to see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where it all began. Marcus Whitfield had not slept in 3 years. Oh, his body rested, his eyes closed. But real sleep, the kind that brought peace, the kind that didn't end with him gasping awake, reaching for a woman who was no longer there, that sleep had died with Catherine. He sat in the back seat of his black sedan at 6:47 in the morning, watching Manhattan blur past the tinted windows. His driver said nothing. Marcus preferred it that way. Words required energy he no longer had. His phone buzzed. A message from his assistant. Board meeting moved up. International partner missed flight. You have 2 free hours. 2 free hours. Marcus almost laughed. What was he supposed to do with 2 free hours? Go Home was a mausoleum, a $70 million tomb where his son sat by the same window, in the same wheelchair, staring at the same patch of sky day after day after day. Turn around, Marcus said. His driver glanced in the rearview mirror. Sir, take me home. The car made a smooth U-turn, and Marcus leaned his head against the cold glass. He didn't know why he was going back. There was nothing waiting for him. There hadn't been for years. But something pulled him, some invisible thread he couldn't name. 20 minutes later, the elevator doors opened to the top-floor penthouse. Marcus stepped out, already mentally sorting through the documents he'd review in his study, already planning how to fill the silence. Then he heard it. Music. Not the clinical tones of Ethan's therapy programs, not the ambient sounds the nurses sometimes played. This was different, textured, warm, alive. Marcus froze. His feet moved before his brain caught up, carrying him down the corridor toward the living room. Each step felt heavier than the last. The music grew clearer, a waltz, delicate but steady. And then he heard something else. Movement, not mechanical, not robotic, fluid, dance-like. His heart began to pound. He reached the doorway and stopped breathing. Isabella Torres, the cleaning woman he'd barely noticed in 6 months of employment, was dancing barefoot on his marble floor. Sunlight cut through the blinds, throwing stripes across her simple uniform. Her movements weren't grand or rehearsed. They were quiet, intuitive, personal. But that wasn't what made Marcus grip the doorframe until his knuckles went white. It was Ethan, his son, his broken, unreachable, silent son. Isabella held Ethan's small hand in hers, guiding his arm through a gentle arc as if he were leading, as if he were participating, and Ethan's eyes were open. Not the vacant stare Marcus had grown accustomed to, not the hollow gaze that looked through everything and everyone. Ethan's pale blue eyes were tracking Isabella's every movement, following her, focused, present. Marcus's vision blurred. For 3 years he had watched his son disappear, watched the light drain from those eyes day by day until nothing remained. He had hired the best neurologists in the country, flown in specialists from Switzerland, Japan, Israel. He had spent millions on experimental treatments, neural stimulation programs, virtual reality therapies. Nothing worked. Ethan sat. Ethan stared. Ethan existed, but he did not live. And now this woman, this stranger, was spinning him gently across the living room floor, and his son was watching her like she was the only real thing in the world. The music slowed. Isabella turned still, holding Ethan's hand, and her eyes met Marcus's. She didn't gasp. She didn't drop Ethan's hand. She didn't stammer excuses. She simply looked at him with an expression he couldn't read, calm, prepared, almost as if she'd been expecting him. Slowly, deliberately, she lowered Ethan's arm to his side, easing him out of the moment, like waking someone from a dream. Ethan didn't flinch, didn't retreat. His gaze shifted to the floor, but not in that blank, dissociated way Marcus knew too well. It was natural, like a boy who'd just finished playing. Marcus opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His throat had closed. His voice had abandoned him. He stood there, the most powerful man in 3 industries, rendered speechless by a maid and a waltz. Isabella offered a small nod. Not apologetic, not guilty, just acknowledgement. One adult to another. Then she turned, gathered her cleaning supplies, and walked past him without a word. Marcus didn't move for a very long time. He stood in that doorway, his mind racing through 1,000 questions. Who gave her permission? What was she thinking? Was this some kind of therapy technique? Did she have training he didn't know about? But none of those questions mattered, because underneath all the logic, underneath all the outrage he should have felt, there was only one truth burning in his chest. Ethan had been watching. His son, who hadn't made eye contact with anyone in over a year, had tracked that woman's movements like she was the sun. Marcus finally forced his legs to carry him into the living room. He walked slowly toward Ethan's wheelchair, half expecting the boy to retreat into himself the moment Marcus approached. But Ethan didn't recoil. He didn't move, but he didn't shut down either. His fingers curled slightly inward. Marcus noticed the smallest tension in his arm, like the muscle had remembered it existed. And then Marcus heard it. A sound so faint he almost missed it. A vibration, a whisper. Ethan was humming. The melody was barely audible, off-pitch trembling. But it was there, the same waltz Isabella had played. Marcus staggered backward. His son was humming. For 3 years, nothing. No sounds, no attempts at communication. The specialist said Ethan had retreated into himself so completely that he might never find his way back. They used words like severe psychological withdrawal and emotional shutdown and trauma-induced selective mutism. They talked about his son like he was a case study, a puzzle to solve, a problem to fix. And now Ethan was humming a song a cleaning woman had played for him. Marcus stumbled to his study and locked the door behind him. His hands shook as he pulled up the security footage on his computer. He needed to see it again, needed to confirm it wasn't a hallucination. The footage was grainy but clear enough. There was Isabella entering the living room with her cleaning cart. There was Ethan positioned by the window as always. Marcus watched Isabella pause, look at the boy, and pull out a small portable speaker from her pocket. She pressed play. The waltz began. For a long moment, nothing happened. Isabella cleaned. Ethan stared. Marcus was about to fast forward when he saw it. Ethan's fingers twitched. Isabella noticed too. She stopped cleaning, walked slowly toward him, held out her hand, and Ethan, his son, who hadn't voluntarily moved anything but his eyes in 3 years, lifted his arm. Marcus rewound the footage, watched it again, and again, and again. Each time, the same impossible thing happened. Ethan reached for her. That night, Marcus didn't pour himself his usual drink. He didn't answer emails. He didn't do anything but sit in the dark, replaying that moment in his mind. His son had reached for a stranger, not for the neurologist who visited twice a week, not for the physical therapist who moved his limbs through prescribed exercises, not for the speech pathologist who held up cards and waited for responses that never came. He had reached for the cleaning woman. Marcus didn't know whether to laugh or scream or cry. He did none of those things. He just sat there feeling something stir in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. He refused to name it. Hope was dangerous. Hope was a cliff with no bottom. But something had cracked open inside him, and he couldn't seal it shut again. The next morning, Marcus waited. He sat in his study door open, listening for the sound of the elevator. At 8:15, he heard it. The soft chime, the shuffle of footsteps, the familiar rhythm of the cleaning crew arriving. He forced himself to wait another hour before summoning her. "Isabella Torres, to my study, please." The words came through the intercom, flat and controlled. Marcus stood behind his desk, hands clasped behind his back, arranging his face into the expression he used in boardrooms. Cold, commanding, unreadable. Isabella appeared in the doorway less than a minute later. She stood straight, chin slightly raised. Not defiant, but not cowering either. She was wearing the same simple uniform, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes steady. Marcus gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit." "I'll stand," she said. Something flickered in Marcus's chest. Annoyance, respect. He couldn't tell. "Fine," he said. "Explain what you were doing yesterday." Isabella's expression didn't change. "I was dancing." "With my son?" "Yes." The word hung in the air between them. Marcus felt his control slipping. "Why?" Isabella met his gaze without flinching. "Because I saw something in him." "You saw something?" Marcus's voice dripped with something that wasn't quite sarcasm. "You've worked here for 6 months. You're paid to clean surfaces and empty trash. And you saw something that 23 specialists with combined centuries of experience missed." Isabella didn't look away. "I saw a flicker." Marcus waited. "I played a song," she continued. His fingers twitched. He followed the rhythm, so I moved with him. "You moved with him?" Marcus stepped around the desk closer to her. "You're not a therapist, Isabella. You're not trained. You have no credentials, no qualifications, no right to touch my son." His voice had risen despite his best efforts. The words came out harder than he intended. Isabella stood her ground. "No one else touches him either." Marcus stopped. "Not with joy," she continued. "Not with trust. I didn't force him. I followed him." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He turned away, unable to meet her eyes. She was right. The therapists touched Ethan with clinical detachment. The nurses touched him with professional care. No one touched him like a person, like a child, like someone who still existed inside that frozen body. "You could have undone months of therapy," Marcus said, his voice quieter now. "Years of careful progress." "What progress?" The question was gentle, but it cut deep. Marcus spun to face her. "There are protocols, structures, methods that have been developed by experts who understand how trauma works. You can't just waltz in here and what?" Isabella interrupted. "Make him react, make him reach for something, make him hum." Marcus's mouth opened, then closed. Isabella's voice softened. "I know what I did was unexpected. I know it crossed a line. But I watched him, Mr. Whitfield. For months, I watched him sit by that window like he was waiting for something that would never come. And yesterday, I decided to give him something to wait for." Marcus sank into the chair behind his desk. His hands trembled slightly as he pressed them flat against the surface. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," he said. "The accident didn't just take his mother. It took him. The Ethan who laughed and ran and called me daddy every morning. That boy is gone. What's left is—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Isabella stepped closer. "What's left is still in there." Marcus looked up at her. "I've seen it," she said. "When I play music, his eyes change. When I move, he follows. He's not gone, Mr. Whitfield. He's hiding. And sometimes people who are hiding just need someone to show them it's safe to come out." Marcus didn't respond for a long time. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything he couldn't say. Finally he spoke. "I should fire you." Isabella nodded slowly. "You probably should. You broke every rule, every protocol, every boundary this household has established for Ethan's care." "I know." Marcus looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. She wasn't beautiful in the conventional sense, but there was something about her, a stillness, a presence that demanded attention. She didn't shrink under his gaze. She didn't apologize. She just stood there solid as a rock, certain of what she had done. "If you ever touch my son again without permission," Marcus said slowly, "you will be terminated immediately. No references, no severance, nothing." Isabella nodded. "But for now," Marcus continued, his voice catching despite himself, "you can stay." Something shifted in Isabella's eyes. Not triumph, not relief. Something closer to understanding. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Mr. Whitfield." He looked up. "He was alive yesterday," she said softly. "Even just for a minute. That's more than he's been in a long time." She left before he could respond. Marcus sat alone in his study for hours after that. He pulled up Ethan's medical files, scrolling through reports he'd read 100 times. Prognosis guarded, progress minimal. Recommendations continue current treatment protocols. The same words repeated across dozens of reports month after month after month. He thought about what Isabella had said. He's not gone. He's hiding. The specialist talked about Ethan like he was broken machinery. They discussed neural pathways and psychological blockages and trauma responses. They never talked about him like he was a boy who was scared and alone and waiting for someone to find him. Marcus picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts. His thumb hovered over the number for Dr. Reeves, Ethan's primary neurologist. He should call. He should report what happened. He should get a professional assessment of whether Isabella's intervention had caused any damage. But he didn't call. Instead, he put the phone down and walked to Ethan's room. The boy sat where he always sat, his wheelchair positioned by the window, his eyes fixed on the city skyline. The late afternoon light painted shadows across his pale face. Marcus stood in the doorway, unsure what to do. He hadn't spent more than a few minutes alone with Ethan in months. What was there to say? What was there to do? The boy couldn't respond. Couldn't engage, couldn't give Marcus anything to work with. But today felt different. Marcus walked slowly into the room and sat in the chair beside Ethan's wheelchair. He didn't speak. He just sat there watching his son watch the sky. For a long time, nothing happened. Then Marcus heard it again. That faint, trembling hum, the same melody from yesterday. His throat closed. Ethan was humming, softly, barely audibly, but he was humming. Marcus reached out his hand, hovering just above Ethan's. He wanted to touch his son, wanted to grab him and hold him and never let go. But something stopped him. Some instinct told him that reaching too fast, pushing too hard, would shatter whatever fragile thing had awakened. So he just sat there, listening to his son hum, feeling something crack open inside his chest. When the melody faded, Marcus spoke. His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "I heard you, buddy. I heard you." Ethan didn't respond. His eyes stayed fixed on the window, but his fingers twitched. Just once, just slightly. And Marcus, the man who hadn't cried since his wife's funeral, felt tears streaming down his face. He didn't wipe them away. Over the next few days, Marcus found himself watching Isabella more closely than he intended. He told himself it was supervision, quality control, making sure she followed the rules he'd established. But the truth was something different, something he wasn't ready to admit. He was watching to see if she could do it again. Isabella moved through the penthouse with quiet efficiency, cleaning surfaces, organizing spaces, doing exactly what she was paid to do. She didn't play music. She didn't dance. She didn't approach Ethan at all. But she hummed, soft, almost inaudible melodies that seemed to drift through the rooms like ghosts. Marcus noticed them first from his study, faint sounds that pulled at something in his memory. And he noticed something else, too. When Isabella hummed, Ethan's head would turn, just slightly, just for a moment. His eyes would track toward the sound, then drift back to the window. It happened once, then twice, then every time Isabella passed through the living room. By the fourth day, Marcus couldn't pretend anymore. Something was happening, something real. He found Isabella in the laundry room sorting linens with mechanical precision. She looked up when he entered, but didn't stop working. "The humming," Marcus said without preamble. "Is that intentional?" Isabella's hands paused for just a moment. "He responds to it." "I noticed." She resumed sorting. "You asked me not to touch him. You didn't say anything about humming." Marcus almost smiled. Almost. That's a technicality. It's the truth. He leaned against the doorframe, studying her. "Where did you learn those songs? They're not anything I recognize." Isabella was quiet for a moment. "My grandmother taught them to me. When I was a child in Brazil, she would sing them while she worked. She said music was the thread that connected the living to the dead." "Do you believe that?" Isabella looked up at him. I believe that music reaches places words can't. Marcus thought about that for a long moment. Then he pushed off from the doorframe and turned to leave. Mr. Whitfield. He stopped. He's not responding to the music, Isabella said quietly. He's responding to presence, to consistency, to someone who doesn't need anything from him. Marcus didn't turn around. What do you mean? Everyone who comes to see him wants something. They want him to speak, to move, to respond. They're always testing, always measuring, always disappointed. Her voice softened. I don't want anything from him. I just want him to know he's not alone. Marcus stood there for a long moment, his back to her, his throat tight. Then he walked away without another word. That night he pulled out an old photo album from the closet in his bedroom. He hadn't looked at it since the funeral, hadn't been able to bear it. But now, sitting on the edge of his bed in the darkness, he turned the pages slowly. There was Catherine laughing at some joke he couldn't remember. Catherine holding baby Ethan, her face radiant with exhausted joy. Catherine dancing in the kitchen, Ethan balanced on her hip, both of them spinning to music only they could hear. She had loved to dance, not professionally, not formally, just freely, barefoot in the kitchen, twirling in the living room, pulling Marcus into spontaneous waltzes when he came home from work, even when he was tired, even when he was distracted. She had said dancing was how she prayed. Marcus touched the photo with trembling fingers. In it, Catherine was spinning with Ethan, both of them mid-laugh, caught in a moment of pure, unself-conscious joy. He hadn't danced since she died, hadn't let himself. He closed the album and sat in the darkness, feeling the weight of 3 years pressing down on his chest. He had built empires. He had conquered industries. He had accumulated enough wealth to buy anything in the world. But he couldn't buy back his wife. He couldn't buy back his son. He couldn't buy back the life they were supposed to have. And now this woman, this cleaning woman, had walked into his home and done something with a song and a dance that millions of dollars and dozens of experts couldn't accomplish. She had reached his son. Marcus didn't sleep that night. By morning, he had made a decision. He found Isabella just as she was starting her shift. She looked up from her supply cart, her expression neutral. I've reconsidered, Marcus said. Isabella waited. The protocols aren't working. The specialists aren't working. Nothing is working. He took a breath. I want you to continue what you started. Isabella's eyebrows rose slightly. Sir, the music, the humming, whatever you were doing that day when I saw you dancing with him. Marcus's voice was steady, but his hands were not. I want you to do it again, carefully, gradually, under supervision. Isabella studied him for a long moment. You're asking me to do something no one else has been able to do. I'm asking you to try. And if it doesn't work, Marcus met her eyes, then we're no worse off than we are now. Something shifted in Isabella's expression. Not quite a smile, but something close. I have conditions, she said. Marcus blinked. In 20 years of business, no one had ever responded to his offers with conditions. I'm listening. No observers, no cameras in the room while I'm with him, no therapists taking notes in the corner. That's unacceptable. I need to monitor. If you're monitoring, he'll feel it, Isabella interrupted. He's spent 3 years being watched, studied, measured. If I'm going to reach him, I need him to feel like he's not being tested. Marcus's jaw tightened. And if something goes wrong, it won't. You can't guarantee that. Isabella's voice was quiet but firm. I can guarantee that what you've been doing isn't working. You have nothing to lose by trying something different. Marcus stared at her. She was right, and he hated it. He hated that a woman with no degrees and no credentials was standing in his penthouse telling him how to care for his own son. He hated that she was probably the only person in 3 years who had actually reached Ethan. 1 hour a day, he said finally. In the living room. No cameras, but I reserve the right to check in unannounced. Isabella nodded slowly. Acceptable. And Isabella, Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping. If you hurt my son in any way intentionally or not, there is no corner of this earth where you will be safe from me. Isabella didn't flinch. She held his gaze steadily, and for a moment Marcus saw something flash in her eyes. Not fear, not defiance, understanding. "I would never hurt him," she said quietly. "He's already been hurt enough." The words landed like a knife between Marcus's ribs because they were true, and because deep down Marcus knew that he was part of that hurt. His absence, his withdrawal, his inability to look at his son without seeing everything he had lost. "Start tomorrow," Marcus said hoarsely. Isabella nodded once and returned to her cart. Marcus walked away, his chest tight, his mind racing. He had just handed his son's care to a stranger with no qualifications and no track record. Every instinct he had screamed that this was wrong, that he was being reckless, that he was putting Ethan at risk. But underneath all that noise, one thought kept rising to the surface. Ethan had reached for her. In 3 years of stillness, his son had reached for someone, and that was worth any risk. The next morning, Marcus stationed himself in his study with the door open. He could hear Isabella arrive at her usual time, heard her speak quietly to Linda the nurse, heard her footsteps moving toward the living room. Then he heard music, soft, gentle, the same waltz from before. Marcus gripped the edge of his desk and forced himself to stay seated. Every fiber of his being wanted to march into that room and watch, to supervise, to control. But he had made a promise, so he sat and listened and waited. An hour later, the music stopped. Isabella appeared in his study doorway. Her expression was neutral, but there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "He followed the ribbon," she said simply. Marcus's heart stopped. "What?" "I brought a ribbon, yellow. I moved it through the air slowly, and his eyes tracked it. 3 times. Marcus stood so fast, his chair nearly toppled. "Show me." Isabella shook her head. "Tomorrow, same time." She turned and walked away before he could argue. That night, for the first time in 3 years, Marcus felt something he had sworn he would never feel again. Hope. It was small, fragile, dangerous. But it was there, and he couldn't make it go away. The following morning came too slowly. Marcus had been awake since 4, pacing his bedroom, checking the clock every few minutes, like a man waiting for a verdict. When 8:15 finally arrived and he heard the elevator chime, his whole body tensed. Isabella's footsteps were unhurried, steady, the same rhythm as always. Marcus forced himself to stay in his study. He had promised. No hovering, no watching. But his hands gripped the armrests of his chair so hard his knuckles ached. The music started at 8:32. He knew because he was counting every second. Today, the melody was different. Slower, more deliberate. Marcus closed his eyes and listened, trying to imagine what was happening in that room. Was Ethan watching? Was he responding? Was the ribbon moving through the air again? The hour felt like a year. When the music finally stopped, Marcus was already on his feet, already moving toward the door. He caught himself halfway down the hall and stopped, forcing his breathing to slow. Isabella appeared around the corner a moment later. Well, the word came out sharper than he intended. Isabella's face was calm, but there was something underneath. A current of energy she was trying to contain. He reached for it. Marcus's heart slammed against his ribs. What do you mean, reached for it? The ribbon. I let it drift past his hand and he lifted his fingers. Not much, maybe half an inch, but he reached. Marcus grabbed the wall for support. His vision blurred. Half an inch. To anyone else, it would mean nothing. To him, it meant everything. I need to see him, he said hoarsely. Give him time. He's tired. He's my son. Isabella stepped closer, her voice dropping. And he just did something he hasn't done in 3 years. Let him rest. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to push past her and run to Ethan's room and see for himself. But something in Isabella's eyes stopped him, a certainty that he couldn't match. Tomorrow, she said. Same time. She walked past him toward the laundry room, and Marcus stood alone in the hallway, trembling. Half an inch. His son had reached for something. That night, Marcus did something he hadn't done since before the accident. He went to Ethan's room before bed, not to check monitors or review therapy notes, just to sit. Ethan was positioned by the window, as always, his face lit by the city lights below. His eyes were open but unfocused, staring at nothing Marcus could see. Marcus pulled a chair close and sat down heavily. "I heard you did something amazing today, buddy." No response. Marcus hadn't expected one, but he kept talking anyway. "Isabella says you reached for the ribbon. That's pretty incredible." His voice cracked. "Your mom would have been so proud of you." At the mention of Catherine, something flickered across Ethan's face. So brief, Marcus almost missed it. A twitch of his eyebrow, a slight tension in his jaw. Marcus leaned forward. "You remember her, don't you? You remember Mom?" Ethan's eyes shifted, not toward Marcus, not toward the window, somewhere in between, like he was looking at something only he could see. "She loved you so much," Marcus whispered. "More than anything in the world, more than me even, and I was always a little jealous of that." He laughed softly, but it came out more like a sob. "I know I haven't been here for you. Not really. I've been so scared of watching you disappear that I stopped trying to find you, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Ethan's fingers twitched. Marcus froze. He watched his son's hand, holding his breath, waiting for something more. But the moment passed and Ethan's fingers went still again. It didn't matter. Marcus had seen it. His son had responded, not to therapy, not to medication, to his voice, to his words, to him. He sat in that room for 3 more hours talking about everything and nothing. Catherine, the company, the weather, childhood memories, stories Ethan probably couldn't understand or remember. He talked until his voice gave out, and when he finally left just before midnight, he pressed a kiss to his son's forehead. "I'm going to find you," he whispered. "I promise." The days that followed blurred together in a rhythm Marcus had never experienced before. Every morning at 8:30, Isabella would begin her session with Ethan. Every morning, Marcus would sit in his study, listening to the music, forcing himself not to interfere. And every morning, Isabella would report something new. Day 3. Ethan's eyes tracked the ribbon for 15 seconds without breaking focus. Day 5. He hummed along to the melody. Faint, but unmistakable. Day 7. His hand lifted 3 inches off the armrest when the ribbon passed close. Day 9. He held the ribbon for 4 seconds before letting it fall. Each report hit Marcus like a lightning bolt. He started keeping a journal, writing down every detail, every observation, every tiny victory. The journal filled faster than he expected. But it wasn't just Ethan who was changing. Marcus found himself leaving his study more often, taking meals in the kitchen instead of his office, walking through the living room during Isabella's sessions just for a glimpse of what was happening. He never interrupted, never spoke, but he watched through the crack in the doorway, his heart pounding every time Ethan moved. On day 12, he saw something that broke him. Ethan was holding the yellow ribbon in his left hand. Isabella was holding the other end, moving gently, creating a wave pattern in the fabric. And Ethan was not just watching, he was mimicking. His arm moved in small, jerky motions, trying to match Isabella's rhythm. Failing, trying again, failing again, but trying. Marcus had to cover his mouth to keep from crying out. He pressed his back against the wall outside the living room and slid down until he was sitting on the floor, tears streaming down his face. His son was trying. After 3 years of nothing, Ethan was trying. When the session ended, Marcus didn't wait for Isabella to find him. He walked straight into the living room, still wiping his face, not caring what he looked like. Isabella looked up from where she was collecting the ribbon. Her expression shifted when she saw his tears. "Mr. Whitfield, I saw it," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "I saw him trying." Isabella nodded slowly. "He's been trying for days. He just needed someone to notice." The words hit Marcus like a hammer. Someone to notice. He had hired dozens of specialists, spent millions of dollars, built systems and protocols and schedules, but he had never just sat and watched his son, never just noticed him. "How do you do it?" he asked. "How do you reach him when no one else could?" Isabella set the ribbon down carefully. I don't try to reach him. I just let him know I'm here. The reaching is up to him. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Marcus shook his head. You must have training, background, something that explains this. Isabella was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. My brother was like Ethan. Marcus's breath caught. He was in an accident when I was 15. Head trauma. The doctors said he would never wake up, never respond, never be anything but a body in a bed. She walked toward the window, her back to Marcus. My mother couldn't accept it. She spent every day with him, talking to him, singing to him, moving his arms like they were dancing. The doctors said she was wasting her time, that he couldn't hear her, that his brain was too damaged. Isabella turned to face him. She didn't listen. She kept singing, kept dancing, kept believing, and one day after 7 months he opened his eyes and said her name. Marcus felt the floor shift beneath him. He recovered. Not fully. He never walked again, never spoke more than a few words at a time. But he was there. He was present. He knew us. Isabella's eyes glistened. He lived another 8 years before his heart gave out. 8 years we wouldn't have had if my mother had listened to the experts. Marcus didn't know what to say. He stood there speechless as Isabella gathered her supplies. Ethan isn't broken, she said as she passed him. He's just waiting for someone to believe he's still in there. She left him standing in the empty living room, her words echoing in his head, waiting for someone to believe. That night Marcus pulled out Catherine's old photo albums again, but this time he didn't just look. He talked. He told the photos about Isabella, about Ethan, about the ribbon and the humming and the tiny movements that meant more than any boardroom victory he'd ever achieved. She's reaching him, he whispered to Catherine's smiling face. I don't understand how, but she's reaching him, and I think maybe she's reaching me too. He closed the album and pressed it against his chest. I'm trying, Kath. I know I've been a coward. I know I ran away from him because I couldn't stand seeing you in his eyes. But I'm trying now. I'm finally trying. The photo didn't answer, but somehow Marcus felt heard. Day 15 brought the first real crisis. Marcus was in his study when he heard Isabella's voice rise sharply. Not angry, alarmed. He was running before he knew he was moving. In the living room, Isabella was kneeling beside Ethan's wheelchair. The boy was trembling, his whole body shaking, his eyes wide and wild. What happened? Marcus demanded, dropping beside them. I don't know. We were working with the ribbon and he just started shaking. Marcus grabbed Ethan's face, turning it toward him. Ethan, look at me. Can you hear me? Ethan's eyes rolled. His breathing came in short, sharp gasps. His hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles went white. Call Dr. Reeves, Marcus ordered. Now! Isabella was already moving toward the phone when Ethan made a sound. Not a hum, not a moan, a word. No. Everyone froze. Marcus's heart stopped. He stared at his son, unable to breathe, unable to think. What did you say? He whispered. Ethan's trembling intensified, his face contorted with effort, and then clearer this time. No, doctor. Isabella dropped the phone. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. His son had spoken. 2 words. The first words in 3 years. Okay, Marcus said, his voice shaking violently. Okay, buddy. No doctor. No doctor. He grabbed Ethan's hands and held them tight. The trembling began to slow. Ethan's breathing evened out. His eyes, still wild, found Marcus's face and held there. I'm here, Marcus said. I'm right here. You're safe. Ethan stared at him for a long moment. Then his eyes shifted to Isabella, who was standing a few feet away, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. His lips moved again. Isabella. She let out a sob and rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside them. I'm here too, sweetheart. I'm here. Ethan's gaze moved between them, back and forth, like he was trying to understand something he couldn't quite grasp. Then his body went limp, and he slumped back in his wheelchair, exhausted. Marcus and Isabella stayed on the floor holding his hands, neither one willing to let go. He spoke, Isabella whispered. He spoke. Marcus couldn't respond. He just knelt there, clutching his son's hand, crying harder than he had since the day Catherine died. His son had spoken. His son was still in there, and somehow impossibly he was finding his way back. The next few days were different. Marcus canceled all his meetings, every single one. His assistant thought he was having a breakdown. Maybe he was. He didn't care. He spent every waking moment near Ethan's room, not hovering, not pushing, just present. Isabella continued her sessions, but something had shifted in them too. She no longer worked alone. Marcus sat in the corner, quiet, watching learning. He saw how she never rushed, how she let Ethan set the pace, how she celebrated the smallest movements without making them feel like tests. He saw how she talked to Ethan like a person, not a patient. How she asked questions she didn't expect answers to. How she filled the silence with warmth instead of anxiety. On day 18, Ethan spoke again. Isabella was adjusting the ribbon when he looked up at her and said, clear as a bell, "Pretty." Isabella smiled so wide it transformed her whole face. "You think the ribbon is pretty?" Ethan's eyes moved from the ribbon to Isabella's face. "You," he said. Isabella's smile faltered. Her eyes filled with tears. She glanced at Marcus, who was sitting in the corner, his own eyes wet. "Thank you, Ethan," she whispered. "That's very sweet." Ethan's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Marcus had to leave the room. He couldn't hold it together anymore. He stood in the hallway, his back against the wall, sobbing silently. His son had just complimented someone, had just expressed an opinion, had just done something so normal and so miraculous that Marcus couldn't process it. 3 weeks ago, Ethan was a ghost, a shadow, a boy who existed but didn't live. Now he was calling the cleaning woman pretty. Marcus laughed through his tears. It was absurd. It was wonderful. It was everything. When he collected himself enough to return to the room, Isabella was showing Ethan how to make the ribbon dance in the air. His movements were clumsy, uncoordinated, but he was trying. He was always trying now. Marcus sat back down in his corner and watched, and for the first time in 3 years, he felt like a father again. Day 22 brought something unexpected. Marcus walked into Ethan's room for his usual morning visit and found something on the table beside the wheelchair. A napkin. White. Simple. On it was a drawing. 2 stick figures. One tall, one small. Their arms were curved, stretched out. They were dancing. Marcus picked up the napkin with trembling hands. Ethan was watching him. Not the window. Not the floor. Him. "Did you draw this?" Marcus asked, his voice barely audible. Ethan blinked twice. His version of yes. Marcus looked at the drawing again. The lines were shaky, uneven. The figures were simple, but they were unmistakably dancing, and one of them had long, dark hair drawn in bold strokes. Isabella. His son had drawn Isabella. "This is beautiful," Marcus said. "This is so beautiful, Ethan." Ethan's lips moved. It took a moment for the sound to form. "For you." Marcus broke. He dropped into the chair beside Ethan and cried like a child. He cried for the drawing, for the words, for all the years he had missed because he was too afraid to try. When he finally looked up, Ethan's hand was extended slightly, reaching. Marcus took it without hesitation. They sat like that for a long time, father and son, hands clasped, silent. But it was a different kind of silence now, not empty, full, alive. Later that day, Marcus found Isabella in the kitchen eating lunch alone. He sat across from her without asking permission. "He drew you," Marcus said. "Dancing. He gave it to me." Isabella set down her sandwich. "I know. I saw him working on it yesterday." "You didn't tell me." "It wasn't mine to tell." Marcus shook his head slowly. "I don't understand you." Isabella's eyebrow rose. "What don't you understand? You've worked miracles in this house. Actual miracles. Any other person would be demanding credit, recognition, a raise at minimum." Isabella smiled faintly. I don't need credit for loving someone." The word hit Marcus like a physical blow. Loving. "You love him." "Of course I do." Isabella said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "He's easy to love once you see him." Marcus leaned back, processing. "Most people don't see him. They see his wheelchair, his silence, his condition. Most people don't look. But you did. Someone had to." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked the question that had been burning in his mind for weeks. "Why? Why did you look when no one else did?" Isabella picked up her sandwich, took a bite, chewed slowly. When she finally answered, her voice was matter-of-fact. "Because I know what it feels like to be invisible." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" Isabella set the sandwich down again. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw something vulnerable underneath her steady calm. "I grew up poor, invisible, the kind of person people look through, not at. My whole life I've been the help, the cleaning lady, the one no one notices." She paused. "But I also know that invisible people are still people. We still feel, we still dream, we still hope. And when I saw Ethan sitting by that window, I recognized something in him." "What?" "Someone who was waiting to be seen." Marcus felt the words settle into his chest like stones. "I see him now," he said quietly. "Because of you." Isabella shook her head. "You always saw him, Mr. Whitfield. You were just too afraid to look." The accusation was gentle, but it stung, because it was true. "How do I make up for 3 years?" Marcus asked. "How do I fix what I've broken?" "You don't fix it. You don't make up for it. You just start again, every day. Every moment. You show up and you stay present, and you let him know you're there." She picked up her sandwich again. "That's all any of us can do." Day 25 marked a turning point. Marcus arrived at Ethan's room for his morning visit and found Isabella already there. She was holding the yellow ribbon, but she wasn't moving. She was waiting. "What's happening?" Marcus asked from the doorway. Isabella glanced at him, then back at Ethan. "I want you to join us today." Marcus's heart stuttered. "What?" "The sessions. I want you to be part of them. Not watching. Participating." Marcus took a step backward. "I don't know how to—" "You don't need to know how. You just need to be present." Ethan's eyes moved toward Marcus, watching, waiting. Marcus looked at his son, at the yellow ribbon, at Isabella's outstretched hand. Everything in him wanted to run, to hide behind the excuse of work, of responsibility, of not wanting to interfere. The same excuses he had used for 3 years. But Ethan was watching him. His son was watching him. Marcus walked into the room slowly, like a man approaching sacred ground. Isabella handed him one end of the ribbon. "Hold it gently," she instructed. "Let it move naturally. Don't force anything." Marcus's hands were shaking. The ribbon trembled between his fingers. Isabella took the other end and began to sway gently, creating a wave pattern in the fabric. Ethan's eyes tracked the movement back and forth, back and forth. "Now you," Isabella said. Marcus moved his arm awkwardly. The ribbon jerked. The wave pattern broke. "Gentler," Isabella said. "Don't think. Just feel." Marcus tried again, a little better. The ribbon rippled between them, and then Ethan's hand rose, slowly, shakily. He reached for the ribbon, his fingers stretching toward the fabric. Marcus held his breath. Ethan's fingers closed around the ribbon. All 3 of them were connected now. Isabella at one end, Marcus at the other, Ethan in the middle. Isabella began to sway again, and this time Marcus followed her lead. The ribbon moved in gentle waves between them, and Ethan held on his arm, moving slightly with the rhythm. They stayed like that for several minutes, silent, connected, moving together like a single organism. When the session ended, Marcus realized he was crying again. He seemed to do that a lot lately. "That was incredible," he whispered. Isabella smiled. "That was Tuesday. Wait until you see what he can do." Day 28, evening. Marcus was working late in his study when Linda the nurse appeared in his doorway. Her face was pale. Mr. Whitfield, you need to come to Ethan's room. Now. Marcus was running before she finished the sentence. He burst through Ethan's door, his heart hammering, expecting the worst. But what he saw stopped him cold. Ethan was standing, not fully, not steadily. He was gripping the edge of his bed, his legs trembling violently beneath him, his face contorted with effort. But he was standing. "Oh my God," Marcus breathed. Ethan's eyes found his father's face, and despite the strain, despite the trembling, he smiled. "Dad." The word came out broken, rough, like it had been trapped inside him for years and was finally fighting its way free. "Dad!" Marcus crossed the room in 2 strides and caught Ethan just as his legs gave out. They collapsed together onto the bed, Marcus holding his son tight, both of them shaking. "I've got you," Marcus sobbed. "I've got you, buddy. I've got you." Ethan's arms, weak but determined, wrapped around his father's neck. "Dad," he said again, and then softer, "Missed you." Marcus broke completely. He held his son and cried and laughed and cried again. He said things he couldn't remember later. Apologies, promises, declarations of love that he should have been making every day for 3 years. Linda stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Somewhere in the penthouse, Isabella was finishing her shift, unaware of what was happening. But Marcus knew he would tell her. He would tell everyone. His son had stood. His son had smiled. His son had called him Dad and said he missed him. The boy everyone had given up on was coming back. And Marcus would never let him go again. The news spread through the penthouse like wildfire. By morning, every member of the staff knew what had happened. Linda had told the night security guard. The security guard had told the morning cook. The cook had told the driver. And by the time Isabella arrived for her shift at 8:15, she walked into a house buzzing with whispered excitement. She found Marcus in the kitchen, unshaven, exhausted, and grinning like a man who had just discovered the meaning of life. "He stood," Marcus said before she could speak. "Last night, he stood up and called me Dad." Isabella's hand flew to her chest. "He what?" "He stood. He held onto the bed and he stood up and he looked at me and he said, 'Dad.'" Marcus's voice cracked. "He said he missed me, Isabella. My son said he missed me." Isabella sat down heavily in the nearest chair, her eyes filled with tears. "Oh my God." "I know." "Marcus, do you understand what this means?" It was the first time she had called him by his first name. Neither of them noticed. "It means the doctors were wrong," Marcus said. "It means everyone was wrong. It means he's been in there this whole time waiting." Isabella wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I knew it. I knew he was in there." Marcus crossed the kitchen and did something he had never done before. He took Isabella's hands in his. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for seeing him when I couldn't. Thank you for believing when I had given up. Thank you for saving my son." Isabella shook her head. "I didn't save him. I just opened the door. He walked through it himself." "You opened the door," Marcus repeated. "That's more than anyone else could do." They stood there for a long moment, hands clasped, 2 people who had started as strangers and become something neither of them could name. Then Linda appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Whitfield, Ethan is awake. He's asking for both of you." Marcus and Isabella looked at each other. "Both of us?" Isabella asked. Linda nodded. He was very specific. He said Marcus and Isabella, those exact words. They found Ethan sitting up in bed, his eyes brighter than Marcus had seen them in years. When they entered the room, his face transformed. "You came," he said. His voice was still rough, still halting, but it was stronger than last night. "Of course we came," Marcus said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "We'll always come." Ethan's eyes moved to Isabella. "You too." Isabella sat on the other side. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart." Ethan looked between them back and forth like he was trying to memorize their faces. "I had a dream," he said slowly, "about Mom." Marcus's breath caught. "You did?" She was dancing, in the kitchen, like she used to. Ethan's eyes grew distant. "She said she sent someone to help me, someone who would teach me to dance again." Isabella made a small sound beside him. She said, "Don't be scared. Ethan continued. She said the music never stopped. I just forgot how to hear it. Marcus couldn't speak. His throat had closed completely. I hear it now, Ethan whispered. I hear the music again. The three of them sat together in silence, letting the weight of his words settle over them. Somewhere in the distance, the city hummed with its usual chaos, but inside that room, time had stopped. Can we dance today? Ethan asked suddenly. All three of us. Marcus looked at Isabella. She looked back at him. Yes, Marcus said. We can dance today. The session that afternoon was unlike any that had come before. Isabella brought the yellow ribbon as always, but this time there were two ribbons, one for her and Ethan, one for Marcus and Ethan. They stood in a triangle connected by fabric and something deeper. Isabella started the music, the same waltz that had begun everything, and slowly, gently they began to move. Ethan couldn't stand for long. His legs were still weak, still learning to remember what they had forgotten. But he stood long enough to take 2 steps, then 3, then 4. Marcus held his son's arm, steadying him, feeling the tremors that ran through his small body with every movement. You're doing amazing, buddy, he whispered. I'm so proud of you. Ethan's face was set with concentration. Don't let go. Never. Isabella moved beside them, her ribbon creating patterns in the air that Ethan tracked with his eyes. She was humming softly the same melody as always, and Ethan began to hum along. 2 voices, then 3 as Marcus joined in. They weren't dancing, not really. They were shuffling, swaying, moving together in the clumsiest, most imperfect way imaginable, but it was beautiful. When Ethan's legs finally gave out, Marcus caught him and lowered him gently back into his wheelchair. Ethan was breathing hard, sweat beading on his forehead, but he was smiling. Did you see? He asked. Did you see me walk? I saw. Marcus said, his voice thick. I saw everything. Mom would be happy. Marcus closed his eyes. She would be so happy, Ethan, so incredibly happy. That evening, after Ethan had fallen asleep, Marcus found Isabella in the storage room on the 3rd floor. She was supposed to be organizing old files, but when he entered, she was standing motionless, holding something in her hands. What's that? Marcus asked. Isabella turned. Her face was pale. Her hands were trembling. I found something. Marcus stepped closer. In her hands was an old envelope yellowed with age. The handwriting on the front was feminine and elegant. To Marcus Whitfield, Isabella read aloud, only if he forgets how to feel. Marcus's blood ran cold. What? It's from your wife. It was hidden in the back of an old cabinet. I wasn't looking for it. I just found it. Marcus took the envelope with shaking hands. The handwriting was unmistakable. Catherine's. The same looping letters that had signed birthday cards and love notes and grocery lists. It's dated 3 days before the accident, Isabella said quietly. Marcus's legs gave out. He sank onto a dusty crate, staring at the envelope like it might explode. I'll give you privacy, Isabella said, moving toward the door. No. The word came out harder than he intended. Stay, please. Isabella hesitated, then nodded, and sat down on another crate across from him. Marcus opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in Catherine's handwriting. He began to read aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. My darling Marcus, if you're reading this, it means something has happened to me. And it means you've forgotten how to feel. Or maybe you've buried it too deep. His voice cracked. He kept reading. I know you, my love. I know that when things hurt, you retreat. You build walls. You hide behind work and logic and control. It's how you survived your childhood. It's how you built your empire. But it's also how you lose the people who matter most. Marcus's hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. Ethan needs you. Not the businessman, not the problem solver. He needs his father, the one who used to dance with him in the kitchen, the one who used to read him stories with silly voices, the one who loved him before he could do anything to earn it. Tears were streaming down Marcus's face now. Don't try to fix him, Marcus. He doesn't need to be fixed. He needs to be loved. He needs someone who believes he's still in there, even when the whole world says otherwise. Marcus's voice broke completely. He couldn't continue. Isabella gently took the letter from his hands. "Do you want me to read the rest?" He nodded, unable to speak. Isabella's voice was steady but soft. "Maybe someone will reach him when I'm gone. I hope they do. I hope you let them. I hope you're brave enough to let someone in, even when every instinct tells you to shut them out." She paused, her own eyes glistening. "And Marcus, teach him to dance, even when I'm gone, especially when I'm gone. Because dancing isn't about the steps. It's about connection. It's about saying, 'I'm here with you, and I'm not going anywhere.'" Isabella looked up at Marcus. "There's one more line." She read it slowly. "I love you forever. And somewhere, somehow, I'll be dancing with you both. Just look for the music. Love, Catherine." The letter fell to the floor. Marcus buried his face in his hands and wept. Not the quiet tears of the past weeks. Deep, racking sobs that shook his whole body. 3 years of grief, 3 years of guilt, 3 years of running, all coming out at once. Isabella didn't touch him. She didn't offer empty comfort. She just sat there, a steady presence, letting him feel what he needed to feel. When the sobs finally subsided, Marcus looked up at her with red, swollen eyes. "She knew," he whispered. "She knew I would shut down. She knew I would lose him." "She knew you," Isabella said gently. "And she loved you anyway. She wrote this 3 days before the crash. She must have had a feeling. Some kind of premonition." Isabella shook her head. "Or she just knew you better than you knew yourself." Marcus picked up the letter, handling it like it was made of glass. "Teach him to dance," he repeated. "That's what she wanted. That's all she wanted. And that's what you're doing." Marcus looked at Isabella, really looked at her, and felt something shift inside him. "You're the one she was talking about," he said, "the someone who would reach him. She wrote this letter, and 3 years later you walked into my house." Isabella's expression flickered. Something passed across her face that Marcus couldn't read. "Maybe," she said quietly. "Or maybe it's just coincidence." "You don't believe that." Isabella was silent for a long moment. Then she stood and walked toward the door. "There's something else I need to tell you," she said, her back still turned. "But not tonight. Tonight you need to sit with this." "What do you mean, something else?" "Tomorrow. I'll tell you tomorrow." She left before he could respond. Marcus sat in that storage room for hours, reading Catherine's letter over and over, letting her words wash over him like water. She had known. She had prepared. Even from beyond the grave, she had tried to guide him back to his son. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in Ethan's room instead, watching his son breathe, thinking about letters and dances and the mysterious woman who had walked into his life and changed everything. What else did Isabella need to tell him, and why had she looked so scared? Morning came too soon. Marcus was in his study, exhausted but wired, when Isabella appeared in the doorway at exactly 8:15. "We need to talk," she said. Marcus gestured to the chair across from his desk. This time Isabella sat. She was holding something in her hands, another envelope. This one was older, more worn. "Last night, after I left you in the storage room, I kept looking through those old files," Isabella said. "I couldn't sleep. I don't know why, but something told me to keep looking." Marcus leaned forward. "What did you find?" Isabella set the envelope on his desk. The handwriting on the front was masculine bold. "For my other daughter," she read aloud. "Do you recognize the handwriting?" Marcus stared at it. His face went pale. "That's my father's handwriting. Richard Whitfield." Isabella nodded slowly. "I know." Marcus picked up the envelope. "Other daughter. My father didn't have any other children, just me." "Open it." Marcus's hands were shaking again as he pulled out the contents. There was a letter, and beneath the letter, a document, a birth certificate. Marcus read the name on the birth certificate and felt the room spin. Isabella Maria Torres, father Richard James Whitfield. He looked up at Isabella, his mind refusing to process what his eyes were seeing. "This isn't possible." "It's possible," Isabella said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were clasped tightly in her lap. "My mother worked for your father in 1983 in Brazil. He was there for some kind of business initiative. They had an affair." Marcus shook his head. "No, my father would have told me." "He would have, would he, from everything I've learned about Richard Whitfield? He wasn't exactly the confessing type." Marcus stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. "You're telling me you're my sister, half-sister, and you've known this whole time?" "No." Isabella's voice sharpened. "I had suspicions, stories my mother told me when I was young. A man with pale blue eyes and important hands, she used to say. But I didn't know for certain until I found that envelope last night." Marcus paced the room, his mind racing. "You came here looking for this. You took this job because you knew." "I came here looking for work," Isabella said firmly. "I took this job because I needed money. I stayed because of Ethan." "How convenient." Isabella stood, her eyes flashing. "You think I planned this? You think I somehow knew your son would need me? You think I orchestrated some elaborate scheme to get close to your family? I don't know what to think." "Then let me make it simple." Isabella stepped toward him, her voice rising. "I am a cleaning woman. I scrub toilets, I mop floors, I empty trash cans for people who look through me like I don't exist. I didn't come here to claim some inheritance or expose some scandal. I came here because it was the only job I could get." Marcus's chest heaved. "And you expect me to believe that—" "I don't care what you believe. I care about Ethan. That's the only thing I've ever cared about since the moment I walked into this house." They stared at each other, both breathing hard, the birth certificate lying on the desk between them like a bomb. "My mother never asked your father for anything," Isabella said, her voice quieter now. "She raised me alone, worked 3 jobs, died when I was 22. She never told me who my father was. All she said was that he was a powerful man who wasn't brave enough to love us." Marcus flinched at the words. "I found out his name after she died. Richard Whitfield. I looked him up, saw his picture, saw yours." Isabella's voice trembled. "I didn't plan to come here. I didn't plan any of this. But maybe there's a reason it happened anyway." Marcus sank back into his chair, his head in his hands. "This changes everything." "Does it?" Isabella asked. "I'm still the same person who danced with your son. I'm still the same person who helped him speak again. The only thing that's changed is what you know about me." Marcus looked up at her. His eyes were red, his face haggard. "I need time to process this." Isabella nodded. "I understand. I'm not saying you have to leave, I just need time. Take all the time you need." Isabella walked toward the door, then stopped. "But Marcus, don't let this come between you and Ethan. Whatever you feel about me, whatever you decide, he needs you. He needs both of us." She left without looking back. Marcus sat alone in his study, staring at the birth certificate, feeling his entire world restructure itself around this new truth. Isabella Torres was his half-sister. The woman who had saved his son was family. And he had no idea what to do with that. 3 days passed. Marcus avoided Isabella. He didn't attend the morning sessions. He didn't seek her out in the kitchen or the laundry room or anywhere else. He buried himself in work and phone calls and anything that would distract him from the truth he couldn't face. But he couldn't avoid Ethan. On the 3rd day, his son asked the question he had been dreading. "Where's Isabella?" Marcus was sitting beside Ethan's bed, reading aloud from a book. He stopped mid-sentence. "She's still here. She's just been busy." "No." Ethan's voice was clearer now, stronger. "You're keeping her away." Marcus closed the book. "What makes you say that?" "I can tell. You look at the door when she walks by. You leave before she comes in." Ethan's eyes, so much like Catherine's, held his father's gaze. "What happened?" Marcus didn't know how to answer. How do you explain adult complications to a 9-year-old? It's complicated, buddy. "Uncomplicated." Marcus almost laughed. So simple, so direct. "Isabella found out something about our family," Marcus said carefully. "Something that changes things." "Changes what?" "Changes who she is to us." Ethan frowned. She's Isabella. She's the music lady. She's my friend. She's more than that, Ethan. She's... Marcus hesitated. She might be family. Ethan's eyes widened. Family. She might be my sister, your aunt. Marcus expected confusion. He expected questions. He expected some kind of childish misunderstanding. Instead, Ethan smiled. Good, he said simply. Marcus stared at him. Good. Now she has to stay forever. Marcus's heart clenched. Ethan, it's not that simple. There are questions, complications. I don't even know if... Dad. Ethan reached out and took his father's hand. She makes the music. She made me walk. She made you happy. Marcus's breath caught. Why does it matter who she is? Ethan asked. Why does it matter where she came from? She's here. She's ours. That's what matters. Marcus looked at his son, this boy who had been silent for 3 years, who was now speaking wisdom that most adults never achieved. When did you get so smart? Marcus whispered. Mom told me in my dream, Ethan said. She said love doesn't care about papers. It only cares about showing up. Marcus bent forward and pressed his forehead against his son's hand. You're right, he said. You're absolutely right. That evening, Marcus went looking for Isabella. He found her in the storage room organizing the files she had been working on before everything changed. Her back was to him, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. I've been an idiot, Marcus said. Isabella didn't turn around. That's one word for it. I reacted badly. I was scared and confused, and I took it out on you. I'm sorry. Isabella slowly turned to face him. Her eyes were guarded. You had every right to be shocked. I did, but I didn't have the right to shut you out. Not after everything you've done. Isabella crossed her arms. What changed your mind? Ethan. Marcus stepped closer. He told me that love doesn't care about papers. It only cares about showing up. Isabella's expression softened slightly. He said his mother told him in a dream. Tears welled in Isabella's eyes. She blinked them back. Catherine sounds like she was an amazing woman. She was, and I think she would have liked you. You said that before you knew. I meant it then. I mean it more now. Marcus took another step toward her. Isabella, I don't know how to process the fact that you're my sister. I don't know what it means for our relationship or our family or anything else. But I know one thing for certain. What's that? Ethan needs you. And if I'm being honest, I need you too. Isabella uncrossed her arms. Her guard was dropping. I never wanted to complicate your life, she said. I just wanted to help your son. You did help him. You saved him. And now I'm asking you to stay. Not as the cleaning lady, not as a secret half-sister, as family, real family. Isabella's tears finally spilled over. You mean that... I mean it. Marcus reached out and took her hands, just as he had done days ago in the kitchen before everything changed. We're connected, Isabella. By blood, by circumstance, by something bigger than either of us can understand. Let's stop fighting it. Isabella squeezed his hands. I don't know how to be someone's sister, she admitted. I've been alone my whole life. I don't know how to be someone's brother. We'll figure it out together. For a long moment, they stood there, two strangers who had become something more, trying to bridge the gap between them. Then Isabella pulled her hands free and wiped her eyes. Ethan has a session tomorrow morning. You should be there. Marcus nodded. I will be. Good. Isabella started to walk past him, then stopped. Marcus. Yes. Thank you for not sending me away. Thank you for not giving up on us. She smiled the first real smile he had seen from her in days and left the room. Marcus stood alone in the storage room, surrounded by dusty boxes and forgotten files, feeling something settle inside him. He had a sister. His son was coming back to life. And somewhere, somehow, Catherine was still guiding them. The next morning, Marcus joined the session. Isabella handed him the yellow ribbon without comment. Ethan's face lit up when he saw his father. You came. I told you I would. The music started. They began to move. This time was different. There was no tension, no hesitation. Just three people connected by fabric and blood and love moving together. Ethan's steps were steadier now. He could stand for longer. His arms moved with more control, and when he started to hum, Marcus and Isabella joined in. Three voices, one melody, a family finding its rhythm. When the session ended, Ethan looked at both of them with an expression Marcus had never seen before. "I want to show you something," Ethan said. Marcus and Isabella exchanged glances. "Show us what?" Isabella asked. Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he gripped the arms of his wheelchair and began to push himself up. "Ethan, careful," Marcus started. "Wait." Isabella held up her hand. "Let him." Ethan rose slowly, shakily, his face set with determination. He stood for a moment, finding his balance. Then he let go of the wheelchair. Marcus's heart stopped. Ethan took one step, then another, then another. He was walking, not with support, not holding on to anything, walking on his own 2 feet. He crossed the room in small, unsteady steps and stopped directly in front of Marcus and Isabella. "I wanted you to see," he said, his voice trembling with effort. "I wanted you to see what you did." Marcus fell to his knees and pulled his son into his arms. "I see," he sobbed. "I see, buddy. I see." Isabella dropped beside them, her arms wrapping around both of them. The three of them held each other in the middle of the living room, crying and laughing and holding on like they would never let go. Outside, the city went on with its business. People rushed to work, cars honked, life continued. But inside that penthouse, time had stopped. A boy who couldn't walk had walked. A family that was broken had healed. And the music that Catherine had asked them to find, was playing louder than ever. The days that followed Ethan's first independent steps were unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. He canceled meetings, delegated responsibilities. For the first time in his career, he told his board of directors that family came first. The shocked silence on the conference call almost made him laugh. "Mr. Whitfield, the quarterly projections can wait. But sir, the investors will survive without me for a few weeks." He hung up before they could argue further. Every morning now, Marcus was in the living room before Isabella arrived. He set up the speaker. He laid out the ribbons. He positioned Ethan's walker near the window where the light was best. He had become part of the routine. "You're early again," Isabella said one morning, finding him already seated in the corner. "Couldn't sleep." Excited or worried? Marcus considered the question. Both. Always both. Isabella smiled and began unpacking her bag. She had stopped bringing cleaning supplies weeks ago. Now she brought therapy tools, music-colored scarves, textured fabrics, things that made Ethan's eyes light up. "He asked me something yesterday," Isabella said quietly, "after you left." "What?" "He asked if I was going to stay forever." Marcus's chest tightened. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I didn't know, that forever is a long time." "That's not an answer." "I know." Isabella looked at him. "I didn't know what else to say." Marcus stood and walked toward her. "Isabella, I meant what I said. Your family. This is your home now." "Is it?" Her voice was gentle but probing. "I'm still on the payroll, Marcus. Still technically an employee." "That can change." "Can it?" Isabella shook her head. "I don't want charity. I don't want to be the poor relation who showed up and got handed a life. That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" Marcus didn't have an immediate answer. The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to address. The door opened, and Linda wheeled Ethan in. His face brightened the moment he saw them. "Are we dancing today?" "We're always dancing," Isabella said, her voice transforming into something warmer. "Ready?" Ethan nodded eagerly. Marcus watched Isabella help his son to his feet, steadying him with practiced ease. The transformation in Ethan over the past weeks was nothing short of miraculous. His movements were stronger, his balance improved daily, his vocabulary had expanded from single words to full sentences. But it was his spirit that had changed the most. The vacancy that had haunted his eyes for 3 years was gone. In its place was something Marcus had thought he would never see again: joy. "Dad, watch this." Marcus snapped to attention. I'm watching." Ethan let go of Isabella's hand and stood alone. He closed his eyes, took a breath, and began to move. Not walking, dancing. His movements were small, tentative, but unmistakably rhythmic. He swayed from side to side, his arms lifting slightly, his feet shuffling in something approaching a pattern. Marcus's hand flew to his mouth. "He's been practicing," Isabella whispered. "Every night after you leave, he wanted to surprise you." Ethan opened his eyes and looked at his father. "Do you like it?" Marcus couldn't speak. He crossed the room in 3 strides and swept his son into his arms. "I love it," he managed. "I love it so much." Ethan's arms wrapped around his neck. "Mom taught me, in my dreams. She said you would cry." Marcus laughed through his tears. "She was right. She's always right." They held each other while Isabella watched from across the room, her own eyes glistening. This was what healing looked like. Not a single moment, but 1,000 small ones. A dance in a living room, a father's tears, a son's triumph, and a woman who had made it all possible. 2 weeks later, Marcus made a decision. He didn't tell Isabella. He didn't tell Ethan. He made phone calls, drafted documents, consulted lawyers. By the time he was finished, everything was in place. He found Isabella in the kitchen eating lunch alone, as she often did. "I have something for you," he said, sliding a folder across the table. Isabella looked at it suspiciously. "What's this?" "Open it." She wiped her hands on a napkin and pulled the folder toward her. Inside was a stack of legal documents. "I don't understand," she said, flipping through the pages. "What am I looking at?" "A job offer, official, with a title and benefits and everything that comes with being part of Whitfield Technologies." Isabella's eyes widened. "You want me to work for your company?" "I want you to run a division of it." Marcus sat down across from her. "I've been thinking about what happened here, what you did for Ethan, and I realized that there are thousands of kids out there like him. Kids who've given up, kids whose parents have given up, kids who just need someone to see them." Isabella set the documents down slowly. "Marcus, I'm not qualified to run anything." "You're the most qualified person I've ever met. I don't have degrees. I don't have credentials. Neither did the specialists who failed my son for 3 years. Marcus leaned forward. "You have something better than credentials, Isabella. You have instinct. You have compassion. You have whatever it is that made you dance with a paralyzed boy who everyone else had written off." Isabella's hands were trembling. "What exactly are you proposing? A foundation, the Whitfield Center for Children with Disabilities. You would run it, design the programs, hire the staff, build something that does for other families what you did for ours. That's insane. It's the sanest thing I've ever done." Isabella stood abruptly and walked to the window. Her back was to Marcus, her shoulders rigid with tension. "I can't accept this." "Why not?" "Because it's too much. Because I don't deserve it. Because I'm just a cleaning woman who got lucky." Marcus stood and walked toward her. "You're not just anything, Isabella. You're the woman who saved my son. You're my sister. And whether you believe it or not, you're exactly the person who should be doing this." Isabella turned to face him. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I've never been responsible for anything bigger than a mop and a bucket." "Then you'll learn. We'll learn together." "What if I fail?" "Then we'll fail together too." Marcus put his hands on her shoulders. "That's what family does." Isabella looked at him for a long moment. Then she laughed a sound somewhere between joy and disbelief. "You're crazy." "Probably. This is never going to work." "Probably not." "I have no idea what I'm doing." "Neither do I," Marcus smiled. "But I'm pretty sure that's how all the best things start." Isabella wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I need to think about it." "Take all the time you need." She looked at the folder on the table. "How long do I have? Forever, or until you say yes, whichever comes first." Isabella laughed again, and this time it was lighter. Something had shifted in her expression. "I'll give you an answer by the end of the week." "Fair enough." Marcus turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "Isabella, yes. Whatever you decide, you're still family. That doesn't change." He left before she could respond. 3 days later, Isabella gave him her answer. She walked into his study without knocking and placed the folder on his desk. I have conditions, she said. Marcus raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. First, I want to be involved in every aspect of the design, the building, the programs, the staff, everything. Done. Second, I want to bring in consultants from Brazil. There are techniques I learned from my mother that aren't practiced here, traditional approaches that the medical establishment ignores. Done. Third, I want Ethan to be involved, not as a patient, as a partner. His experience should shape how we help other children. Marcus's throat tightened. He would love that. I know. Isabella's voice softened. He told me. He said he wants to help other kids who are stuck in the quiet place. The quiet place. That's what he calls it. The place he was for 3 years. He says it's dark and lonely, but the music helped him find the way out. Marcus closed his eyes. The quiet place. His son had given a name to the prison he had been trapped in. We'll make sure every child finds their way out, Marcus said. Whatever it takes. Isabella nodded. Then I accept. She extended her hand, and Marcus shook it, but the handshake quickly turned into an embrace. Thank you, Isabella whispered, for believing in me. Thank you for believing in him. They held each other for a moment, two people who had started as strangers and become something neither of them fully understood. When they pulled apart, Isabella was smiling. So, where do we start? I was hoping you would tell me. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Marcus threw himself into the project with an intensity he hadn't felt since the early days of building his company. But this was different. This wasn't about money or power or market share. This was about something real. He hired architects, consulted designers, interviewed potential staff members. He worked 18-hour days, but for the first time in years, the work didn't feel like a burden. Isabella was with him every step of the way. She challenged his assumptions, questioned his decisions, pushed back when she thought he was wrong. She was nothing like the deferential employees he was used to dealing with. She was his equal, his partner, his sister. The therapy rooms are too clinical, she said one afternoon looking at the architectural plans. They look like hospital rooms. Kids don't heal in hospital rooms. What would you suggest? Color, warmth, natural light, spaces that feel like living rooms, not examination rooms. Marcus made notes. What else? Music in every room, not piped in, live. We should have musicians on staff. That's expensive. So is failure. Marcus looked up at her. You've thought about this a lot. I've thought about nothing else for weeks. He studied her face. The woman who had scrubbed his floors was gone. In her place was someone confident, passionate, driven, someone who had found her purpose. What happened to the woman who said she couldn't accept this because it was too much? Isabella smiled. She realized that too much is exactly what these kids need. Ethan's progress continued to astound everyone. By the end of the second month, he was walking unassisted for 10 minutes at a time. His vocabulary had expanded to match a typical 9-year-old. His physical therapy sessions, once dreaded, had become something he looked forward to. But it was the dancing that truly showed how far he had come. Every evening after dinner, the three of them would gather in the living room. Isabella would play music. Marcus would take one of Ethan's hands. Isabella would take the other. And together they would dance. Not the careful therapeutic movements of the early days, real dancing, spinning, swaying, laughing. I want to dance at the opening, Ethan announced one night, breathless from a particularly energetic waltz. Marcus and Isabella exchanged glances. The opening, Marcus asked, of the center. When it opens, I want to dance in front of everyone. Isabella knelt beside him. That's a big thing, sweetheart. There will be a lot of people watching. I know, but I want them to see. Ethan's eyes were bright with determination. I want them to see that the quiet place doesn't have to last forever. Marcus's heart swelled. His son, who had been silent for 3 years, wanted to stand in front of strangers and show them what was possible. Are you sure? Marcus asked. There's no pressure. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. I'm not trying to prove anything. Ethan looked at his father with an expression far too wise for his 9 years. I'm trying to give them hope, like Isabella gave me. Marcus looked at Isabella. Her eyes were glistening. Then that's what we'll do, Marcus said. You'll dance at the opening. Ethan's smile could have lit up the city. The preparations for the opening consumed every waking moment. Marcus had decided to host it in the penthouse itself, transforming the grand hallway into an event space. It was unconventional, but Isabella had convinced him that the location mattered. This is where it started, she said. This is where Ethan took his first steps. This is where our family began. It should be here. So here it would be. Invitations went out to some of the most influential people in the city. Doctors, philanthropists, media personalities, politicians, anyone who could help spread the word about what the Whitfield Center would offer. But Marcus also invited others. Families with disabled children, parents who had been told their kids would never recover, people who needed hope more than connections. It's going to be a strange mix, his event planner warned him. Billionaires and struggling families in the same room. Good, Marcus said. That's exactly what I want. The night before the opening, Marcus couldn't sleep. He wandered through the penthouse in the dark, checking preparations, adjusting details that didn't need adjusting. At 3 a.m, he found himself standing in the living room, staring at the spot where Isabella had first danced with Ethan. Couldn't sleep either. He turned. Isabella was standing in the doorway, wearing a robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. Too much on my mind. She walked toward him and stood beside him, both of them looking at the same spot. This is where it happened, she said quietly. This is where everything changed. I was so angry when I saw you that day. I thought you were destroying everything. I know. I almost fired you. I know that, too. Marcus turned to face her. What if you had listened to me? What if you had stopped? Isabella shook her head. I couldn't. Something told me not to stop. Something bigger than both of us. Catherine. Isabella looked at him. You believe that... I didn't used to believe in anything beyond what I could see and measure. Marcus's voice was rough with emotion. But then you walked into my house and danced with my son, and he started to come back. And my wife left a letter that predicted you would come. And you turned out to be my sister. He laughed softly. I don't know what I believe anymore, but I know that whatever this is, it's not random. Isabella reached out and took his hand. She would be proud of you, she said. Catherine, she would be so proud of who you've become. I haven't become anything. I've just stopped hiding. That's the hardest thing a person can do. They stood in silence for a long moment, holding hands in the darkness. Are you ready for tomorrow? Marcus asked. No, Isabella laughed. Are you... not even close? Then we'll be unready together. Marcus squeezed her hand. That seems to be our specialty. The morning of the opening dawned clear and bright. Marcus was up at 5, showering, dressing, reviewing his speech for the 100th time. By 7, the catering team had arrived. By 9, the event staff was setting up chairs. By 11, the hallway had been transformed. Ethan spent the morning with Isabella practicing his dance routine. Marcus could hear the music from his study, could hear his son's laughter echoing through the halls. At 2 o'clock, Linda knocked on his door. The first guests are arriving, Mr. Whitfield. Marcus straightened his tie and took a deep breath. Let's do this. The next few hours were a blur of handshakes and small talk and photo opportunities. Marcus smiled until his face hurt. He answered the same questions a dozen times. He accepted congratulations for a center that hadn't opened yet, but through it all, he kept looking for Isabella and Ethan. He found them in the corner of the hallway, away from the crowds. Isabella was kneeling beside Ethan's wheelchair, her hands on his shoulders, speaking quietly. Marcus approached and heard the tail end of her words. Just like we practiced, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you. Ethan nodded, but his face was pale. There are so many people. I know, sweetheart, but remember what we talked about. You're not dancing for them. You're dancing for the kids who are still in the quiet place. You're showing them the way out. Ethan took a deep breath. Okay. I can do that. Marcus knelt beside them. Hey, buddy, how are you feeling? Scared. That's okay, I'm scared too. Ethan looked at him with surprise. You are terrified, but you know what? The best things always happen when we're scared and do them anyway. Ethan considered this. Mom said that once, before the accident. Marcus's throat tightened. She was right. She's always right. Yeah. Marcus put his hand on his son's shoulder. She is. At 4 o'clock, Marcus took the stage. The hallway was packed. Hundreds of people stood shoulder to shoulder, a mix of gowns and casual clothes, wealth and struggle, hope and skepticism. Marcus cleared his throat and began. 3 years ago, I lost my wife, and in my grief, I lost my son too. Not to death, but to something almost worse. Silence. Stillness. A prison of trauma that no amount of money or expertise could break. He paused, letting the words settle. I hired the best doctors, the best therapists, the best specialists in the world, and every single one of them told me to accept the inevitable, that my son was gone, that I should focus on making him comfortable. His voice hardened. I almost believed them. He looked toward the corner where Isabella and Ethan waited. And then a cleaning woman named Isabella walked into my house and danced with my son. She didn't have credentials. She didn't have degrees. She didn't have anything but a song and a ribbon and a belief that he was still in there waiting for someone to find him. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. What happened next is something I will never fully understand. But I can tell you this, my son spoke his first word in 3 years that month. He stood for the first time. He walked for the first time. And tonight he's going to show you something that everyone told me was impossible. Marcus stepped back from the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my son, Ethan Whitfield. The crowd parted. Isabella walked forward, leading Ethan by the hand. He was no longer in his wheelchair. He was standing, walking, moving under his own power. Gasps echoed through the hallway. They reached the center of the space, and Isabella positioned herself beside Ethan. The music started soft and familiar, the same waltz that had begun everything. And then Ethan began to dance. His movements were small, but precise. His feet shuffled in a pattern he had practiced 100 times. His arms rose and fell with the rhythm. But it was his face that captivated everyone. He was smiling, not a forced smile, not a performance. A genuine expression of joy that radiated through the room. Isabella joined him, taking his hand, leading him through simple turns and steps. They moved together like they had done so many times before in the privacy of the living room when no one was watching. Marcus watched from the stage, tears streaming down his face. This was his son, his broken, unreachable, impossible son, dancing in front of hundreds of people. The music built to a crescendo, and Ethan did something they hadn't planned. He let go of Isabella's hand. He stood alone in the center of the hallway, and he turned to face the crowd. My name is Ethan, he said, his voice clear and strong. I was in the quiet place for 3 years. It was dark and scary and lonely. But the music brought me back. He looked at Isabella, then at Marcus. If you have someone in the quiet place, don't give up on them. Play the music. Dance with them. Believe they're still in there. Because they are. He reached for Isabella's hand again. They're just waiting for someone to find them. The room erupted. Applause thundered through the hallway. People were crying, cheering, some of them reaching for their phones to capture the moment. But most of them were simply staring at the boy who had spoken words they needed to hear. Marcus jumped down from the stage and crossed to his son. He dropped to his knees and pulled Ethan into his arms. I'm so proud of you, he whispered. So incredibly proud. Ethan held him tight. Did I do okay? You did more than okay. You did everything. Isabella wrapped her arms around both of them, and the three of them stood there embraced, while the crowd continued to applaud. Later that night, after the guests had left and the cleanup crews had begun their work, Marcus found Isabella standing alone in the living room. She was looking at the spot where she had first danced with Ethan, her expression distant. Thinking about the beginning, Marcus asked. thinking about everything. Mom, she turned to face him. Do you remember what you said to me that first day when you caught me dancing with him? I told you to get out. Isabella nodded. You were furious. I was terrified. There's a difference. Not much of one. Marcus walked toward her. What made you come back? After I threatened you, after I nearly fired you, why did you keep showing up? Isabella was quiet for a long moment. Because I saw myself in him, she finally said. When I was young, after my mother died, I went to a dark place too. Not like Ethan's, but similar. I stopped speaking, stopped eating, stopped living. Marcus hadn't known this. What brought you back? An old woman in my neighborhood. She used to play music outside my window. Every day, same time, same songs, for months. She never asked me to come out. She never demanded anything. She just played. Isabella's voice trembled. One day I opened the window. A week later I went outside. A month later I was dancing with her in the street. She wiped her eyes. She died a year later, but she saved my life. Marcus understood now. You were paying it forward. I was doing what someone did for me. Isabella looked at him. We don't heal alone, Marcus. We heal through connection, through presence, through showing up for each other, even when it's hard. Marcus nodded slowly. Catherine knew that. She wrote about it in her letter. She was a wise woman. She was the best person I've ever known. Marcus paused. Until I met you. Isabella's breath caught. Marcus, I'm not saying that to flatter you. I'm saying it because it's true. You're the most remarkable person I've ever encountered, and I don't know what I did to deserve having you walk into my life. Isabella shook her head. You didn't do anything. That's the point. Grace doesn't require earning. Then what does it require receiving? Isabella smiled. Just letting it in. They stood in silence for a long moment. What happens now? Isabella asked. We open the center. We help as many kids as we can. We keep dancing. That simple? That complicated. Marcus reached out and took her hand, but we'll figure it out together. Isabella squeezed his hand. Together, she repeated, and in that moment, standing in the room where everything had started, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness exactly, not the giddy joy of success or achievement. Something quieter, deeper. A sense that for the first time since Catherine's death, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. With his son, with his sister, with the family that had found each other in the most unlikely way. The music might have stopped for the night, but in Marcus Whitfield's heart, it was playing louder than ever. 6 months had passed since the opening night. The Whitfield Center for Children with Disabilities had become something none of them had anticipated. What started as an idea born from one boy's recovery had grown into a movement that touched thousands of lives across the country. Marcus stood in his office on a Tuesday morning, reading the latest report. 300 children enrolled in the program. 47 had shown significant improvement. 12 had spoken their first words. 8 had taken their first steps. Every number represented a family whose life had changed. You're staring at that report like it's a love letter. Marcus looked up. Isabella was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, a knowing smile on her face. It kind of is, he admitted. Do you know what this means? 12 children spoke. 12 families heard their kids' voices for the first time. I know, I was there for most of them. Marcus set the report down. How do you do it? How do you stay so calm when miracles are happening around you? Isabella walked into the office and sat across from him. They're not miracles. They're the result of patience, presence, and believing in people when no one else does. That sounds like a miracle to me. Then you need to raise your standards for ordinary human kindness. Marcus laughed. It was something he did often now. Laughing, smiling, feeling. The man who had locked himself in grief for 3 years had slowly emerged like a plant finding sunlight after a long winter. Ethan wants to talk to you, Isabella said. He's been asking all morning. About what? He wouldn't tell me. He said it's a surprise. Marcus raised an eyebrow. A surprise from Ethan. I know. I'm curious too. They found Ethan in the therapy room on the second floor of the center. He was sitting at a table drawing something with intense concentration. When he heard them enter, he quickly covered the paper with his hands. "Not yet," he said. "It's not ready." Marcus and Isabella exchanged glances. "Okay," Marcus said, sitting down across from his son. "Take your time." Ethan worked for another few minutes, his tongue poking out slightly as he concentrated. Finally, he lifted his hands and turned the paper around. Marcus's breath caught. It was a drawing of 3 figures, not stick figures like his early attempts. These were more detailed, more careful. A tall man, a woman with long dark hair, and a boy between them, his arms raised mid-dance. Above the figures in careful letters, Ethan had written, "My family." "I made it for the wall," Ethan said, "in the main room, so other kids can see that families come in different shapes." Marcus couldn't speak. He reached for the drawing with trembling hands. "Do you like it?" Ethan asked, suddenly uncertain. "I love it," Marcus managed. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Isabella leaned over Marcus's shoulder, her eyes glistening. "Sweetheart, this is incredible." "I wanted to show that families aren't just people who look alike," Ethan explained. "Sometimes they're people who found each other, like us." Marcus pulled his son into his arms. "When did you get so wise? I had good teachers." Isabella laughed through her tears. "Now you're just showing off." They hung the drawing in the main room that afternoon, right in the center of the wall where every child and parent who walked through the doors would see it. My family, a billionaire, a cleaning woman, a boy who had been lost and found again. Not a traditional family by any definition, but real, true, theirs. The next few weeks brought challenges no one had anticipated. A reporter from a national news outlet had been following the center's story, and the article she published caught fire. Within days, requests for interviews flooded in. Talk shows, podcasts, news programs. Everyone wanted to hear about the billionaire and the maid and the miracle boy. Marcus's instinct was to say no to all of it. "I don't want Ethan to become a spectacle," he told Isabella one evening. "He's not a circus act." "No one's treating him like a circus act." "Not yet. But you know how the media works. They'll turn our story into entertainment. They'll reduce everything we've been through to a feel-good segment between the weather and sports." Isabella considered this. "Or they'll inspire thousands of families who are going through what we went through." Marcus looked at her sharply. "You think we should do it? I think we should let Ethan decide." They brought it to Ethan that night. Marcus explained the situation carefully, making sure his son understood what it would mean. The cameras, the questions, the strangers knowing their story. Ethan listened quietly, his face thoughtful. "Will it help other kids?" he asked when Marcus finished. "It might. If they see what's possible, it might give them hope." "Then I want to do it." "Are you sure?" "Once this is out there, we can't take it back." Ethan nodded. "I was in the quiet place for 3 years, Dad. If talking about it helps one kid get out faster, it's worth it." Marcus looked at Isabella. She nodded. "Okay," Marcus said. "We'll do it." The first interview aired 3 weeks later. Marcus watched it alone in his study, unable to sit with anyone else. He was too nervous, too protective, too worried about how the world would see his son. The segment began with old footage of the penthouse shots of the center images of Ethan in his wheelchair from the years of silence. Then the interview started. The host, a respected journalist, known for her tough questions, sat across from Marcus, Isabella, and Ethan. Her first question was directed at Marcus. "Mr. Whitfield, you're one of the most successful businessmen in America. You could have hired anyone in the world to help your son. Why did it take a cleaning woman to break through?" Marcus took a breath. On the screen, he watched himself answer. "Because I was looking in the wrong places. I was looking for credentials and expertise and proven methods. I wasn't looking for connection. Isabella didn't have a technique. She had compassion. And that turned out to be the only thing that mattered." The journalist turned to Isabella. "Ms. Torres, you had no training in therapy. What made you think you could help Ethan when the professionals couldn't?" Isabella's answer was simple. I didn't think I could help him. I just saw a boy who was alone and I couldn't stand it. So I played some music, I moved a little, and he responded. That's all it was. Some would call that a miracle. Some would call it basic human decency. The journalist turned finally to Ethan. Ethan, you were silent for 3 years. Can you tell us what that was like? Marcus held his breath. Ethan's face was calm, composed. He spoke clearly. It was like being underwater. I could see everything happening above me, but I couldn't reach it. I couldn't swim to the surface. I was stuck. What changed? Ethan looked at Isabella, then at his father. The music. When Isabella played music, it was like a rope, something I could hold on to, something that pulled me up. And your father, how did he help? Ethan smiled. He learned how to feel again, just like me. Marcus had to pause the recording. He sat in his study, tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by the simple truth his son had spoken. He learned how to feel again, just like me. That was it. That was the whole story. Not a tale of medical breakthroughs or innovative therapies. A story of 2 people who had shut down from grief and a woman who had shown them both how to come back to life. The response to the interview was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the center's website crashed from traffic. The phone lines were jammed with calls from parents desperate for help. Donations poured in from across the country and around the world. But it was the letters that affected Marcus most. Thousands of them, handwritten notes from parents who had given up hope, from children who felt seen for the first time, from doctors who admitted they had underestimated the power of human connection. One letter stood out from the rest. It arrived on a Thursday morning, postmarked from Brazil. The envelope was thin, the paper inside worn and fragile. Dear Mr. Whitfield, you don't know me, but I knew your father, and I knew Isabella's mother. I am an old woman now, but I remember things clearly. I remember when Richard Whitfield came to Brazil in 1983. I remember how he and Maria Torres fell in love, and I remember how he left her pregnant and alone because he was too afraid to face what he had done. I watched Maria raise Isabella by herself. I watched her work 3 jobs to keep food on the table. I watched her die, still believing that Richard would come back for them. He never did. But somehow, Isabella found her way to you. Somehow she became the sister you never knew you had, and somehow she saved your son. I do not believe in coincidences, Mr. Whitfield. I believe in grace. Maria used to say that love finds a way even when the path is broken. She would be so proud to see what her daughter has become. Please tell Isabella that her mother is at peace. She did her job. She raised a woman who changes lives. With deepest respect, Rosa Fernandez Marcus read the letter 3 times before showing it to Isabella. She took it with trembling hands, her face pale. Rosa Fernandez, she whispered. I remember her. She lived next door to us when I was a child. She used to bring us food when we had nothing. She knew your mother and my father. Isabella nodded slowly, reading the letter again. Tears fell onto the paper, smudging the ink. My mother never told me the whole story, she said. She just said my father was a powerful man who wasn't brave enough to love us. My father was a coward, Marcus said bluntly. He ran from everything that mattered, his family, his responsibilities, the woman he loved. And yet here we are. Marcus looked at her. What do you mean? His cowardice created us. His running away led to everything that happened. If he had stayed with my mother, I would have grown up in your world. I wouldn't have been a cleaning woman. I wouldn't have walked into your house. I wouldn't have danced with Ethan. She set the letter down. Sometimes the worst decisions create the best outcomes, not despite the pain, but through it. Marcus considered this. It was a perspective he hadn't allowed himself to consider. That his father's failures had somehow led to this moment. That the broken path had ended somewhere beautiful. Do you forgive him? Marcus asked. My father, Isabella, was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, but I think I understand him. Fear makes people do terrible things. It made him abandon my mother. It made you abandon Ethan. It makes all of us smaller than we should be. I didn't abandon Ethan. You did. Not physically, but emotionally you weren't there. You hid behind doctors and money and protocols because you were too scared to face your own grief. The words stung because they were true. "I know," Marcus said quietly. "I know I failed him. You're not failing him now. That's what matters." Isabella folded the letter and placed it in her pocket. "I'm going to write back to Rosa. I want to know more about my mother, the stories she never told me." "Do you want me to come with you to Brazil?" Isabella looked at him with surprise. "You would do that? You're my sister. Your history is my history, and I think it's time we both faced where we came from." 1 year after the opening night, the Whitfield Center celebrated its anniversary with a gala unlike any other. The penthouse was transformed once again, but this time the guest list was different. Yes, there were donors and dignitaries and media personalities, but the majority of the attendees were families who had been through the program, parents holding the hands of children who had found their voices, siblings supporting brothers and sisters who had learned to walk, grandparents wiping tears as they watched miracles they had stopped believing in. Marcus stood at the podium looking out at the crowd. "1 year ago, I stood in this exact spot and told you about my son, about how a cleaning woman named Isabella had danced with him and brought him back from silence, about how I had learned to feel again through watching their connection." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the room. "What I didn't tell you was how scared I was, how certain I was that it wouldn't last, that Ethan would retreat again, that the miracle was temporary." He found Ethan in the crowd standing between Isabella and Linda. His son was smiling, healthy, whole. "I was wrong. The miracle wasn't temporary. It was just the beginning." Marcus gestured to the families in the audience. "In this room tonight are 312 families whose lives have been changed by what we built here. 312 stories of children who were lost and found again. 312 testaments to the power of human connection." He stepped back from the podium. "But I don't want to talk anymore. I want to show you. Ethan." Ethan walked forward through the crowd. He was taller now, stronger. He moved without hesitation, without support, with the confidence of a boy who had conquered the impossible. He joined his father at the front of the room. "Dad and I have been working on something," Ethan said, his voice clear and strong. "We wanted to share it with you tonight." The music started, not the gentle waltz that had begun everything, something bigger, more joyful, a song that made people want to move. Marcus took his son's hand, and they danced. Not the careful, therapeutic movements of the early days, not the shuffling steps of rehabilitation. They danced like a father and son at a celebration, spinning, laughing, moving with abandon. The crowd gasped, then cheered, then began to clap along with the rhythm. Isabella joined them, taking Ethan's other hand. The three of them moved together, a triangle of connection that had been forged through pain and persistence and love. Other children joined in. Parents swept their kids onto the dance floor. Within minutes, the entire room was moving, a sea of people who had been told their dreams were impossible, now dancing together in celebration of everything they had achieved. Marcus looked at his son, his face wet with tears he didn't try to hide. "Are you happy, buddy?" Ethan's smile was brighter than the chandeliers above them. "I'm not in the quiet place anymore, Dad. I'm here. I'm really here. I know. I can see you. That's all I ever wanted, for someone to see me." Marcus pulled his son close. "I see you. I'll always see you. I promise." The night ended with a moment that no one had planned. After the crowds had thinned and the music had faded, Marcus found Isabella standing alone in the living room. She was looking at Ethan's drawing on the wall. "My family." "Thinking about the past year?" Marcus asked. "Thinking about everything." Isabella turned to face him. "Do you remember what I said to you that first day when you caught me dancing with Ethan? You said a lot of things that day. I said he was alive, even just for a minute. I said that was more than he had been in a long time." Marcus nodded. "I remember." "I was wrong." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" "He wasn't alive for just a minute. He was always alive. He was just waiting for us to notice." Isabella walked toward the window, her back to him. "I used to think I saved Ethan, that I did something heroic by dancing with him. But the truth is he saved me. How? By showing me that I mattered, that my presence meant something, that all those years of being invisible, of being the help, of being the person no one noticed weren't wasted. She turned to face him. He saw me, Marcus, before you did, before anyone did. He saw me. Marcus crossed the room and took her hands. I see you now. I know. I see you, and I'm grateful every day that you walked into our lives. Isabella smiled. Even when I broke all your protocols, especially then. They stood together in silence, looking at the drawing on the wall. What happens now? Isabella asked. We keep going. We help more kids. We build something that outlasts us. And the three of us— Marcus looked at the drawing. A billionaire, a cleaning woman, a boy who had been lost and found. We stay family. We keep dancing. We never stop believing in the impossible. Isabella squeezed his hands. I can live with that. Ethan appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Why are you both still awake? Marcus and Isabella exchanged smiles. Just talking about the future, Marcus said. What about the future? About how we're going to keep changing lives together. Ethan walked over and inserted himself between them, taking each of their hands. Then we should probably get some sleep. Changing lives is tiring. Marcus laughed. You're right. Let's go to bed. They walked together down the hallway, the three of them connected, their footsteps echoing softly in the quiet penthouse. At Ethan's door, Marcus knelt and kissed his son's forehead. Good night, buddy. I love you. Love you too, Dad. Ethan looked at Isabella. Love you too, Aunt Isabella. Isabella's breath caught. It was the first time he had called her that. I love you too, sweetheart. So much. Ethan smiled and disappeared into his room. Marcus and Isabella stood in the hallway, both of them overwhelmed by the simple weight of that word. Aunt. He called me Aunt, Isabella whispered. He did. That makes it real, doesn't it? The family thing? Marcus nodded. It was always real. Now it just has a name. Isabella wiped her eyes. I should get some sleep, too. Isabella. She turned. Thank you. For everything. For not giving up. For believing when I couldn't. For loving my son when I forgot how. Isabella smiled through her tears. Thank you for letting me. She walked away, leaving Marcus alone in the hallway. He stood there for a long moment, listening to the silence of the penthouse. But it wasn't the cold, empty silence of 3 years ago. It was a warm silence, a full silence, the silence of a house that had finally become a home. Marcus walked to his bedroom and stopped at the dresser. He opened the top drawer and pulled out Catherine's photograph, the one of them dancing. We did it, Kath, he whispered. We found him. We brought him back. He touched her face in the photograph. And you were right. About everything. The letter, the dancing, the someone who would come to save us. He set the photograph on top of the dresser facing outward. I love you. I'll always love you. But I think I'm finally ready to live again. He climbed into bed and closed his eyes. For the first time in 4 years, Marcus Whitfield slept without dreams. Because sometimes when you finally found your way out of the darkness, you don't need dreams anymore. You have reality. And reality, imperfect and beautiful and full of impossible miracles, was enough. The Whitfield Center grew over the years that followed. More locations opened across the country, then around the world. Thousands of children found their way out of their own quiet places. Thousands of families discovered that hope was not a luxury, but a necessity. Ethan grew too. He graduated from high school. He went to college. He became a counselor at one of the centers, helping children the way Isabella had once helped him. Isabella never stopped dancing. Every morning, in whatever city she happened to be in, she would put on music and move, sometimes alone, sometimes with children from the program, sometimes with Marcus or Ethan. Dancing, she said, was how she prayed. And Marcus learned to feel again. He learned to laugh and cry and love without reservation. He learned that control was an illusion and vulnerability was strength. He learned that the most important things in life couldn't be bought or measured or controlled. They could only be experienced. On the 10th anniversary of the night Isabella had first danced with Ethan, the three of them gathered in the penthouse living room, the same spot where it all began. Isabella put on the music, the same waltz from that first impossible morning. They stood in a triangle connected by ribbons of yellow fabric that had faded over the years but still held together. "Ready?" Isabella asked. Ethan smiled, Marcus nodded, and together they danced, not for an audience, not for cameras, not for anyone but themselves. Three people who had found each other through grief and grace and the stubborn refusal to give up. A family forged by choice, not blood. A miracle built on movement. A legacy written in footsteps. As the music swelled and their feet moved across the marble floor, Marcus felt Catherine's presence in the room. Not a ghost, not a memory. Something more. A warmth, a blessing, a release. She had asked him to teach Ethan to dance. He had done more than that. He had learned to dance himself. The song ended. They stood together, breathing hard, faces flushed with joy. Ethan looked at his father, then at his aunt. "Same time next year." Marcus laughed. "Same time every year, for as long as we can move." Isabella wrapped her arms around both of them. "And even after that," she said, "the music doesn't stop just because our bodies do." "What does that mean?" Ethan asked. Isabella smiled, her eyes bright with tears and wisdom. "It means love is a dance that never ends. Even when we're gone, the rhythm continues. In the people we've touched, in the lives we've changed, in the family we've built." She looked at Marcus. "Your mother knew that?"
She's been dancing with us the whole time.
Marcus nodded, his throat too tight to speak. Ethan took both their hands. "Then let's keep dancing. For her, for us, for everyone still stuck in the quiet place." Marcus found his voice. "For everyone." The music started again, and in that penthouse in Manhattan, three people who had once been lost found themselves exactly where they were meant to be, together, dancing, home. Because in the end, healing doesn't come from medicine or money or expertise. It comes from presence. It comes from patience. It comes from the courage to reach out your hand to someone lost in the darkness and say, "I see you, I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." That is the miracle. That is the message. That is the truth that Marcus Whitfield, Isabella Torres, and Ethan Whitfield carried with them for the rest of their lives. And on quiet nights when the city fell silent and the stars appeared above the Manhattan skyline, anyone who listened closely could hear it, the music, still playing, still dancing, forever.